Hi folks, and welcome to another video deep dive here on the Cord Cutters News channel. And in case you haven't noticed, we're currently making our way through March 2021, and that means, usually at least, that we're heading toward March Madness time. And with a lot of games spread out over the next several weeks, we thought we'd take some time in this video and lay out how this year's tournament will play out, how it's different compared to previous iterations, and perhaps most importantly to everyone tuning in, where you can watch it. If you've been looking forward to this year's tournaments but weren't quite sure where to start, that's where we come in. These are 5 things you should know about March Madness 2021. Number 1. What is March Madness? Okay, fair enough. Let's start there. So March Madness is essentially a marketing or branding term used to describe the National Collegiate Athletic Association's Division I basketball tournament. And the name stems from the fact that much of the tournament occurs, yes, during the month of March. These tournaments have been going on for a long while now. On the men's side, it's been around since 1939, and the women's tournament started off in 1982. However, last year, with COVID-19 concerns starting to develop around the country, the NCAA opted to cancel both the men's and women's tournaments for the 2020 season. But here in 2021, March Madness is back, although it might look a little different compared to previous years, and it's something we'll get into next. Number 2. What's different this year? Okay, so what typically happens during these lengthy tournaments is that teams are selected in 4 different, roughly geographic regions. So you'd see regions like South, North, Midwest, etc. However, due to the ongoing COVID-19 concerns, the NCAA has opted to house its tournaments in more centralized locations. So for the men's tournament, games are scheduled to occur in the Indianapolis and larger Indiana area, and the semifinals, aka the Final Four, and the championship are set to occur at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, where the NFL's Colts usually play. Meanwhile, on the women's side, games will also be held in a centralized location, specifically the San Antonio area, with the semifinals and championship games set to be hosted at the Alamodome. And if this approach to hosting a tournament sounds a little familiar, it might be because the NBA and WNBA used a similar tactic with their so-called bubble seasons during the pandemic, where teams played out a shortened regular season and playoff games in a centralized location to try and reduce the risk of spreading the disease. And as for whether or not fans would be allowed to attend these games, the current guidelines from the NCAA indicate that they'll allow up to 25% capacity at men's games with physical distancing measures in place. Crowd rules at the women's tournament will be slightly different though, so for the first and second rounds of the tournament, attendance is limited to teams and their guests. And then, starting with the third round, also known as the Sweet 16, crowds of up to 17% of capacity will be allowed at the Alamodome in San Antonio. Number 3. How can I watch on pay TV? Okay, with all of that established, let's get to the part where we actually talk about watching these college games, shall we? So for anyone tuning in via traditional pay TV, here's where you can keep tabs on the action. Before the games actually start though, both the women's and men's tournament kick off with a televised event where we learn which teams fill out the entirety of the tournaments. If you've ever heard of your friends or coworkers talking about filling out their brackets, this is probably what they're waiting for. On the women's side, Selection Monday, as it's called, will air on ESPN at 7 p.m. Eastern on March 15th, which, yes, is on Monday. And the men's version is called Selection Sunday, and that occurs a day earlier on March 14th, and you can catch that event at 6 Eastern on CBS. And from there, well, that's when the games begin. Women's games will be carried by ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, and ESPNU. And the men's games will be covered by CBS and Turner Sports, which includes 3 networks, TBS, TNT, and True TV. Number 4. What about streaming options? Okay, so that about covers the traditional pay TV outlets, but what about streaming? Well, you have a few options here. First off, there are a number of live TV streaming services out there that carry some or all of the channels involved in broadcasting both the women's and men's tournaments. That includes options like Hulu with live TV, which starts at $64.99 per month and includes a 7-day free trial. There's also Fubo TV, which also offers a 7-day trial and has plans that start at $64.99 per month. That includes CBS, ABC, ESPN, and ESPN2, but if you want to catch games on ESPNU, you'll need to pay for the Fubo Extra for $7.99 per month. Sling TV's combined Sling Blue and Orange packages will net you channels like TBS, TNT, True TV, ESPN, and ESPN2 for $50 per month. And you can add ESPNU for another $11 per month through the Sports Extra option. For your local content, you'll need to rely on an over-the-air antenna. There's also YouTube TV at $65 per month, which includes access to CBS, TBS, TNT, True TV, ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, and yes, ESPNU. Meanwhile, VidGo offers access to ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, and ESPNU for $55 per month. And then there's options like the newly relaunched Paramount Plus. Both the $9.99 ad-free plan and the $5.99 ad-supported option get you access to your local CBS feed, which means you'll have access to several games, including the men's Final Four and championship games. And by the way, that $5.99 plan is set to be replaced later this year with a pricing tier that doesn't have access to your live CBS station. But for now, it's still a viable option to catch those games. And don't forget local options like Locast and a traditional over-the-air antenna. Depending on your location, these could get you free access to games broadcast on both ABC and CBS. And beyond those streaming options, there's also the NCAA March Madness Live app, where you can watch live streams of all 67 games in the men's tournament regardless of which TV network is broadcasting them. However, there is some fine print here. For one, you'll get a 3-hour free preview period, and after that, you'll need to log in with your pay TV credentials to watch the games being broadcast on TBS, TNT, or True TV. Meanwhile, games airing on CBS won't require that same paid TV login. And here's a list of supported devices for that NCAA March Madness Live app. And you might notice some pretty big platforms on there, including iOS, Android, Fire TV, Roku, and game consoles like Microsoft's Xbox line. Number 5. Where can I find the full schedule of games and TV channels? Okay, time for some more graphics. So here's the current schedule for both tournaments, and yes, feel free to pause at any moment if you need to. First up is the women's tournament, which again starts with Selection Monday on March 15th, and then the first round kicks off the following weekend on March 21st. In all, the tournament will include 63 games, culminating in the semifinals and national championships starting on Friday, April 2nd, and concluding on Sunday, April 4th. And those final games will all be available, as you can see on the chart, on ESPN. And for the men's tournament, here's what that schedule currently looks like, starting with Selection Sunday on March 14th. The first 4 games are set to start on Thursday, March 18th, across a variety of channels, and then you can see the schedule to the subsequent rounds on your screen. And again, feel free to pause at any time if you need to. The action continues throughout the month and into early April when we get to the Final Four and the National Championship. Those games start off on Saturday, April 3rd, and the 67th and final game, also known as the championship game, is scheduled for Monday, April 5th at 9 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Wrapping it all up. So there you go. Those were 5 things you should know about March Madness 2021. And again, it's clear that this year's tournament isn't going to be quite the same as normal, but honestly, that's to be expected given the current situation. And so if you're going to tune into some or all of the tournaments, feel free to sound off in the comment section down below with maybe which teams you're following and how you're planning on following along. Are you going to have your main TV tuned throughout? Maybe you'll have the app playing on your Roku device on a secondary TV. Or maybe you'll have it on your phone on the side while you're supposedly working. Don't worry, I won't tell, but again, feel free to share. And yes, regardless of who you're rooting for and cheering on, I know I'm not the only one, hoping that everyone involved, from the players to the staff, to the families, to the stadium and broadcast crews, all have safe and successful tournaments. As for us though, thanks again for tuning in. If there are other big live events, sporting or otherwise, you'd like us to explore in the future, let us know in the comment section down below. Lastly, and as always, please don't forget to click the like and subscribe buttons down below to help support our channel. For now though, my name is Philip Palermo. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Take care.